large bronze double doors are incongruously sandwiched between a wholesale potato merchant and a timber yard in Covent Garden's dusty and grimy Endell Street. They have the slightly sinister, seldom opened air of the entrance to an unfriendly country's embassy. One almost expects a spy-hole scrutiny or a demand for a password. Yet, eagerly through them, over the past 28 years, have passed practically every well-known name of stage and screen, to be photographed by the man behind them, the doyen, and still the most successful theatrical photographer, Angus McBean. Well, hello, and welcome to this week's A Photographic Life. That introduction was a piece of text which in itself was an introduction to an interview with Angus McBean, which I found in a dusty old photographic magazine. Can you imagine an interview with a photographer beginning like that today? Maybe I should start doing them. Anyway, it alerted me to Angus McBean, a photographer who I haven't thought about for a long time. I actually did meet him. I think it would have been only a couple of years before he actually died. I met him at the Zelda Cheadle Gallery. There was an exhibition there of his work. He was a very small, petite little man with a little embroidered hat and I seem to remember wearing an embroidered gown. He was very theatrical. You may or may not be aware of his work. In a way, in a world of AI and AI manipulation and surrealism and conceptuality, McBean really should be at the forefront, I think, for a lot of these photographers to be looking at and perhaps even, as some of them do, copy. Anyway, who was Angus, McBean? Well, he was a Welsh photographer, set designer and cult figure associated with surrealism. Born in 1904, McBean attended Monmouth School and Newport Technical College, at which time he developed an interest in photography. Fascinated by the apparently magical properties of this process, he wanted to be able to take pictures of people and sold a gold watch left to him by his grandfather to raise the £5 necessary for the equipment he needed. In 1925, after his father's early death from tuberculosis, McBean moved with his mother and younger sister Rowena to a cottage in West Acton in London. For the next 7 years, he worked for Liberty's department store in the antiques department, learning restoration, while his personal life was spent making photographs, mask making, and watching plays in the West End Theatre. In 1932, he left Liberty's and grew his distinctive pointy beard to symbolise the fact that he would never be a wage slave again. Meeting the stage designers Motley Theatre Design Group, he helped in creating theatrical props, including a commission of medieval scenery and some shoes for Sir John Gielgud. There's a lot of S's in that. McBean's masks became a talking point in the newspaper and magazine social columns and were much admired by the leading London West End photographer Hugh Cecil, who offered McBean an assistant's post at his studio, where McBean learnt how to retouch large glass negatives whilst working on his own photographs in the evening. Having learnt the secrets of Cecil's softer style, McBean set up on his own in a studio in a basement in Victoria after just 18 months. He was still known as a mask maker, and he gained a commission in 1936 from Ivor Novello, who was so impressed with McBean's romantic photographs that he commissioned him to take a set of production photographs as well, including of the young actress Vivien Leigh. McBean had a new career and he was to photograph Vivien Leigh on stage and in the studio for almost every performance she gave until her death 30 years later. He soon became one of the most significant portrait photographers in London, However, in the spring of 1942, his career was temporarily ruined when he was arrested in Bath for criminal acts of homosexuality and was sentenced to 4 years in prison. After the war, he attempted to resume his photographic career, and in 1945, not sure whether he would find work again, McBean set up a new studio in a bomb-damaged building in Endell Street, Covent Garden, the very building with those metal doors. Through the late 1940s and 50s, he was the official photographer at Stratford, the Royal Opera House, Sadler's Wells, Glyndebourne and the Old Vic. Magazines such as The Sketch, Tatler and Bystander also regularly commissioned him. Despite the decline in demand for theatre and production photography during the 1950s, McBean's creative and striking ideas provided him with work in the emergent record cover business with companies such as EMI, and he was commissioned to create Cliff Richard's first 4 album sleeves. McBean's later works included being the photographer for the cover of the Beatles' first album, Please Please Me, as well as commissions by a number of other performers. In 1969, he returned with the Beatles to the same location, the EMI offices, to shoot the cover for their album Get Back. This later came out as Let It Be with a different cover, but McBean's photo was used together with an outtake from the original Please Please Me cover shoot for the cover of the Beatles' 1962, 1966 and 1967 to 1970 compilations in 1973, most often known as the Red and the Blue albums anyway. In his later years, McBean became more selective with the work he undertook, but he continued to explore surrealism whilst taking portraits of great notaries such as Agatha Christie, Audrey Hepburn, Laurence Olivier and Noel Coward. Despite reducing the number of commissions he undertook in his later years, McBean continued to work selectively on projects for French magazine L'Officiel and for French Vogue. In 1984, he appeared credited as special guest in the music video for Red Guitar, the debut solo single by British musician-composer David Sylvian. Sylvian had developed a strong interest in McBean's work, and he and director Anton Corbijn invited McBean to appear in the video, which was a homage to the man himself and a coming together of 2 great photographers. In 1990, McBean fell ill whilst on holiday in Morocco, and after returning to England, he died on his 86th birthday. Now, McBean's work is definitely Marmite, but I really recommend that you check it out. And I'll also put the link in the show notes for that video with David Sylvian. Wow, how 1984 that was. That reminder of Angus McBean and, of course, his photographs of the Beatles and their importance reminded me also of how many photographers, famous photographers, great photographers from all different areas of practice also photographed the Beatles, which also made me think about something else, which I'm going to mention in a moment. But here's a list of just a few. Maybe I've missed some out. I'm not sure if I have or not. But just a few of the photographers who have photographed the Beatles. David Hearn, Richard Avedon, Philip Jones Griffiths, Don McCullum, Cecil Beaton, John Loengard, Astrid Kircher, Dizzo Hoffman, Michael Ward, Norman Parkinson, Fiona Adams, Jane Bown, Terry O'Neill, David Bailey, Ferdinando Scianna, Robert Whittaker, Michael Cooper, Elliot Landy, Robert Freeman, Harry Benson, Ethan Russell, Henry Grossman, Monty Fresco and Ian McMillan. A real range there of different photographers. Now, what it made me realise, also I suppose or think about, was today, the pop stars of today seem to be very controlling over their image. A lot of them employ photographers to shoot their Instagram images for them and control everything. Whereas the Beatles, and I think we can all agree, a pretty successful pop group, They didn't feel the need for that kind of a control. They were willing to experiment and try different things with different kinds of photographers. So, Angus McBean to Don McCullum and the Beatles. Who'd have thought that there was a connection there? As has become a regular on the podcast, it seems to me that it's time for listeners' letters. I'm going to start off with the first one, which was a response I gave to the original email. So somebody sent me an email, I responded to them. And what I responded was, thank you very much, but I really don't understand what you're saying. Anyway, the listener emailed back. It's Arthur is his name, and he emailed this. Dear Grant, thank you for taking the time to respond. You read it as a self-help tool. That's a fair reading. I didn't explain what it actually is. Here is the concept. Every critic has interests. Institutional, social, financial. That doesn't make criticism worthless, but it does make it unreliable in a way that is rarely acknowledged. Thurbot, which he's spelling Thurbot, moves those interests into a visible layer, not to simulate better criticism, but to see what remains once the contamination is removed. What remains is uncomfortable. Because the moment people know a text was written by AI, they read it differently. They look for the flaw, the smoothness, the emptiness. But when the text hits home, something no longer aligns with that prejudice. The judgment of the text shifts, not because of the text itself, but because of the knowledge of who wrote it. That is exactly the mechanism photography activated 150 years ago. The machine did it, so it doesn't count. Thurbot positions itself at the centre of that mechanism and exposes it. Thurbot is not a chatbot you prompt. It was built over 2 weeks through arguments about tone, ethics, art history, about what criticism can do and what it cannot. Every line in its doctrine exists because an earlier version failed. The result is not a setting but a character. Most people use AI to make something, an image, a text, a design. I reverse that. I use AI to look at what has already been made, not as an assistant, not as a generator, but as a critic that puts existing work under pressure. That is a different relationship to the medium, and it raises different questions. And then there is this, I should say. Thurbot writes about my work. It attacks it. It sometimes misses. It is sometimes right in a way that hurts. Those texts are published uncorrected. Best regards, Arthur Nienvenhuis, I think is how you pronounce his name. Now, you listening may not understand what I've just said, and I've got to be honest, I don't fully understand it either. But this is the kind of podcast that includes things we don't understand also. So hence me reading it out. And thank you, Arthur, for getting in touch. Another listener here contacting me. Dear Dr. Scott, very formal. I've been a long-time listener of your podcast, Photographic Life, and have also followed your writing at United Nations of Photography. Your perspective on photographic practice and education has been valuable to me in my own teaching. I have taught undergraduate photography at small private colleges since 1989, and although I have retired from full-time teaching, I still do online classes in photography. I wanted to share an observation from the classroom and get your thoughts. Increasingly, whether they're working with smartphones or dedicated cameras, my students default to vertical framing when composing their photographs. What's striking is that this often happens even when the subject matter clearly cries out for a horizontal composition. The choice doesn't seem intentional so much as automatic. Frankly, this making me a little bit crazy. I've been thinking about a couple of possible reasons for this strangeness. First, there's the simple ergonomics of smartphones. They are most naturally held vertically, and that seems to translate directly into compositional decisions. Second, and perhaps more significantly, students are consuming the majority of visual media in vertically oriented formats, Instagram, TikTok and similar platforms, where portrait orientation is not just common but structurally favoured. In that sense, they're not just holding the camera vertically, they're seeing the world photographically through a vertical bias shaped by those platforms. What concerns me is that this default often overrides consideration of subject, space and visual relationships, core elements of photo composition. Given your role as an educator at Oxford Brookes University, that's me of course, I'd be very interested to hear whether you're observing something similar and how you approach it in your teaching. Do you see this as a temporary shift tied to current technologies, or something altering how emerging photographers perceive and construct images? Thank you for all the work you do, both in your podcast and your writing. It continues to inform and challenge my own practice as a teacher. Best regards, Jerry Anderson. I think Jerry's based in the States. Well, I have to say, I responded to Jerry and I did say to him that I'm not seeing what he's seeing. But I think his reasoning and his logic behind what he's seeing makes complete and utter sense to me. So thank you, Jerry, very much for your email. Another message that came in from the States is from somebody called Russell, who says this: after listening to your recent podcast, I thoroughly enjoyed Do Not Bend. Previously, I had heard the name Bill J, but really didn't know much about him. Now I realise his importance and he's on my next read list. Thanks for bringing him to my attention. Regards, Russell. He says, P.S. I'm way out of the league of your usual interviews. That's why I listen. But I thought you might get a kick out of my documentary project, Floating World, examining the absurd reality of life on cruise ships. You can go directly to it at russellcbanks.com. I have to say, I had a look at Russell's project there, and it was, I thought, really interesting and very well done. Definitely a touch or an influence there of Martin Parr, but certainly had its own flavour as well. So thank you very much, Russell, for getting in touch. Thank you for your kind words and for giving me that link. And of course, if you're listening to this and you want to get in touch, I love reading your emails. I do get a lot coming into the HQ as it is, but always happy to receive more. And I do try and get back to all of those that I can. And also, of course, I choose a few every couple of weeks to read out on the podcast, particularly ones which I feel are addressing issues that maybe we're not addressing in the podcast, that we're not dealing with, particularly with the ideas around AI and where photography is going. And whilst I'm talking about that, I just want to remind you that if you're interested in studying photography at an MA master's level in the States, that's equivalent to an MFA, and an online photographic course, may I point you in the direction of the course which I lead at Oxford Brookes University. It is an online MA. It's a fantastically democratic international cohort. We currently have students from Australia, from Ghana, from Norway, Switzerland, the United States, Austria, Germany, as well as the UK. All of those photographers making an incredibly diverse range of bodies of work. Now, if you'd like to learn more about that, you can email me directly through United Nations of Photography. That's a good way of getting hold of me. You can direct message me through Threads. That's another way, at UN of Photo. And you can find out more about the course by going to the Oxford Brookes University website, just popping in professional photography. That's the name of the course, although in the use of the word professional, we're talking very broadly there. And we're currently taking on students. I'm talking to potential students for the coming academic year, which will begin in September. Well, that's about as far as I'm going to go with an advert. We're not the kind of podcast that fills your ears with sponsorship deals, advertising, and all of that kind of stuff. All I ask is, if possible, could you subscribe? Could you write nice things? And of course, get in touch. We're a community, really. I'm not here to talk at you. I like to talk with you, but someone's always got to start the conversation. And invariably, it's me. Anyway, constantly changing world. You know what I'm going to suggest. Just take care.